Game design as an art is a combination of several different skill sets that are brought together to create worlds for players that we can really immerse ourselves in. When we talk about good game design, we think about things like world design, mechanics, storytelling, or overall writing. One thing that I find more often than not is taken for granted is UI. User interface is the thing that keeps you company and kind of holds your hand through the entirety of any given game. It's the first thing that you want to get to know when you launch a new game so that you can successfully interact with the world and all of the other elements that make video games an art. When it's done well, seeing a tiny element of UI from one of your favorite games will make you want to immediately go back to that world. When it's done poorly, it can affect your overall experience in a game and ultimately even be the thing that makes you lose interest in a particular title, even if you don't immediately realize that UI was what ruined it for you. Today we're going to talk about game UI as an art form, and how, when it's done well, it's the thing that helps you delve fully into a game to the point that sometimes you forget that there's a disconnect between the real world and your screen, or how it can bore you out of playing a particular title. Before we get started, hi, my name is Angelika, and I'm really sorry about the super strange lighting in this video. I have to film at this really weird time because I'm a mom now, and I have a very tight schedule. You might hear my manager in the background. Also, please ignore Gordon Fleeman over there. So first things first, what is game UI? User interface is the bridge between you and the digital in-game world. It is made up of visual and interactive components that facilitate the connection to these digital worlds. It's what allows you to play games. Game UI is broken into 4 classes, and the first of these that we're going to discuss is non-diegetic UI. Non-diegetic means that it is not part of the game story or the game space. In-game characters do not know about its existence. These are things that will make up your overlay, like your health, stamina, mana, rage, energy, or whatever else you have. Action bars containing your spells, inventories, skills. This of course includes things like menus. I want to focus on menus first, particularly starting from when you launch a game and you're presented with a screen where you see start game and load game options, or settings, credits, and an exit game button. I think that this is such a crucial element of user interface because it is the thing that gives you the first impression of the game that you're about to play. It'll often have you partially make up your mind before you've even started playing. The first title screen and menu that you see can really set the vibe of the game that you're about to play. You'll get an immediate feel for a couple of things here. So, like I've said, the overall vibe, then music, because that's also part of UI, and sometimes general sound design and the game's font, which is a bigger deal than often given credit to. A really good menu is supposed to be like a portal or a gateway to this other world that you're going to explore, one that accurately reflects the kind of adventure that you're about to have. Menus can be static, in that no matter where you're at in the game, you can get the same screen that you always see when launching, or it can progress with you as you're going through the story. An example of this is something like Half-Life 2, which changes the background of the title screen based on your last checkpoint. Some menus can be more interactive, and they can also have secrets or Easter eggs, like the Black Ops 1 menu where you can escape the interrogation chair and enter some codes on a computer to unlock certain achievements. Most games will have the same title background regardless of where you're at, and one specific menu that I want to discuss right now is from 2004's Painkiller. Launching the game and seeing this title screen puts you in the world immediately. The whole screen is in this sort of worn parchment format, like an ancient text. The background features a winged demon, and the border has some sort of runes or hieroglyphics which make it sort of mysterious. And then the buttons themselves look old and worn, as if they've been clicked on many times by many adventurers. A nice touch is that instead of start game or play game, you have sign the pact, which in this context is like signing a deal with the devil or the demon. But what really ties it together for me is the sound design. Have a listen to the sounds that the buttons make as you're navigating the menu. These demonic sounds are part of what set the tone for the world that you're about to delve into, and this particular style is present throughout the game in loading screens, sub-menus with options, and the load save game screen. There are minimal UI elements on your screen when you're in the game, just enough to give you all of the information that you need without cluttering your space like you're playing World of Warcraft. Which, by the way, if you're playing World of Warcraft, that's sort of where you'll want more stuff on your screen, but I think some people really overdo it. It's not World of Warcraft, it's more like World of get stuff on your screen craft. For shooter games in general, like Painkiller, like Quake, like any Call of Duty, you don't want too many UI elements on screen. At most, maybe you'd add something like quest objectives or a mini-map at the top, but really keeping your screen clean in these sort of games is best. In general, a stylized menu like the one in Painkiller is a foundation from which the rest of the game UI is created, a consistent and coherent look that suits the world and the type of game that you're playing. More and more, we're seeing games move away from these stylized menus and take on a more minimalistic or simple look. To give an example which is the complete opposite of what we just looked at with Painkiller, let's talk about Skyrim. The Skyrim title menu features a completely black screen with the game's logo on one side and buttons on the other. The font doesn't really look like something that would necessarily fit into a fantasy world. It's rather plain and, again, minimalistic, and it's a stark contrast from the previous Elder Scrolls games that featured more interesting looking title screens, particularly Oblivion. It feels like it doesn't do justice to the game overall, as Skyrim is actually quite beautiful. It is vast and mysterious, dangerous and magical, and the UI, the menus, your inventory, are rather underwhelming. I will say I really like the menu for assigning skill points when you level up, the fact that they're using constellations for the different signs, and I wish there was more of that sort of vibe in the whole character menu, but alas, we're just given a black background with a list of items and a picture of the physical item to one side. I've mentioned this already, but again, this is in stark contrast to Oblivion, where not only did you have a stylized character menu in the form of maybe a journal or a book in this parchment color, and instead of showing the physical in-game object as it is on the menu, they have separate artwork to depict what it is that you actually have. They went out of their way to create these small icons for every in-game item. They look magical and serve as another fantastical component that helps you fully immerse yourself in this world. And that's not to speak of all of the other artwork for skills and choosing your class, everything in between that maybe you don't even think of. Skyrim's UI has one saving grace, and it is because of how iconic the game itself is. This overly simplistic UI is widely recognizable as Skyrim across the board. For example, I've even used this black background with the smoke in it for thumbnails, which I think have been quite effective in conveying what game we're talking about, maybe even without including the logo at all. But overall, for fantasy RPGs, I personally do not like this minimalism, because then you start to see it in other games like, for example, Elden Ring, and I mean, for the game that it is, this could have been so much better. The deep lore and story in Elden Ring and all the moving parts in that world seem to not really have been considered much in the creation of its title menu and overall UI. A positive thing to be found here, however, is that Elden Ring and the previous Souls-like games all share a consistent UI, which makes it easier for fans of the games to get into. It's a format that we're used to, and even if Elden Ring is a completely different world and story, having these familiar things in terms of UI is a big bonus for fans of Souls-like games. However, fans of Souls games would also have noticed the way in which overall Elden Ring's menus, character and skill screens, etc. are a lot less detailed, a lot more minimalistic, and less magical. In doing that, this sort of simplification of menus and other UI elements, you're taking away from the art or the artistic elements of user interface. I want to state this very clearly. UI is an art form. It is the unspoken look of the game, and when it's done well, you'll see the tiny element from a familiar game, and it'll bring back the feelings you had when you were playing it. Of course, good UI is also ease of navigation, how legible everything is, but for this video, I want to focus on those beautiful things that make it an art. Before moving on to the other classes of UI, I want to take a moment in this video to highlight the user interface of Diablo 2, specifically classic Diablo 2 and Lord of Destruction, not Resurrected. Starting from the title screen, the original pre-Lord of Destruction menu featured the 5 playable classes all stood around a campfire. They are in complete darkness in what looks like the rogue encampment, and the menu buttons are spaced out so you can still see the heroes. The style of the buttons and their font is consistent in the UI throughout gameplay, this cold stone theme adorned with blue gems either side. One thing I've always loved about the HUD, or heads-up display, is that instead of traditional horizontal health bars or hearts, you have orbs either side of your screen with health and mana. The orbs are held up by what looks like 2 stone statues, a woman on the left, likely an angel, holding your health, and a horned man on the right, probably a demon. This is actually swapped around from Diablo 1, where the demon held the health and the angel held the mana. I don't know if that was intentional, but it's just something I noticed. I think that the Diablo 2 HUD was a step up from Diablo 1 in that instead of having all this text at the bottom of your screen, you had these little icons for all the different menus that you can access. I also think that the consistent theme of this stone wall for the background for most of the interface is incredibly fitting for this cold and hopeless world. You really have to have a thick skin to survive here. There's no comfort, there's no cushiony or velvety soft elements to this UI. It adds to the overall grittiness of the world, something that you just can't shake no matter where you go. You can't even hide behind any of the trade windows or your inventory to escape it for a moment. Even the quest window takes on the form of a stone monument as opposed to the journal format which is typical in most RPGs. This grey stone background really makes any color stand out. So for example, the unique quest icons when a particular quest is active really makes it pop and gives it more of a sense of urgency. The same can be said for any items that you find or hold. They stand out quite a lot, and I think this is really important, especially for things like your health and mana potions. Not even that it makes it more beautiful, but rather that it's easier to see it when you have them and when you don't. It's a lot more noticeable that they're missing. And that is crucial if you're playing a hardcore character. I think that Diablo 2 is one of the best examples of UI as an art form, and to this day it will be my favorite HUD out of any other games that I've played. So that was on non-diegetic UI. Now let's take a look at diegetic UI, which is stuff that does make up the game space and the game story. When doing research for this video, one example that constantly came up for me was the Dead Space trilogy. The UI in this game is very clever and innovative as it doesn't have a traditional HUD with health bars or a separate box to show ammo, etc., but rather they display those things on your character. There's an article that talks about the immersive excellence of Dead Space's UI, and it's one of many such articles, but here it shows a detailed screenshot of what is shown on your character. When in game, this is all you can see. I think that the absence of a traditional HUD makes it a lonelier and therefore more terrifying experience. Dead Space is, after all, a horror game, and I find that horror is most effective in games that don't have a lot going on the screen in terms of UI. In Dead Space, accessing your inventory and other menus is all done through the character's suit, further adding to the immersion and solidifying the feeling that you're really alone. I think that having on-screen elements like text or health bars that are non-diegetic can at least serve as a reminder that you're playing a game and there's a bridge between you and this world. But without this, again, you're just in the world exactly as it is. No on-screen distractions to soothe the terror and make the world feel less frightening, or at least like there is a fourth wall there. You're just in this. The game knows you're afraid, and it embraces this. With that said, it is clear to see that sci-fi and futuristic type settings are perfect for this seamless integration of diegetic UI elements. Another example of this is the Fallout Pip-Boy, which your character wears on their arm. This sort of old computer style of the Pip-Boy draws you even deeper into this post-apocalyptic world. Most modern computers probably didn't make it, but this old, sturdy thing that you have on your arm is here to stay with you. I have kind of a weird example next because technically most of the UI elements here are non-diegetic, but that one moment in Half-Life 2 when Gordon first puts on the Hev suit, the soundtrack starts playing and then your health appears on the bottom left corner.
Well, Gordon, I see your HEV suit still fits you like a glove.
I feel like this one is almost up to your own interpretation. Is it non-diegetic, only existing for you, or is Gordon also seeing his health appear as a result of putting on this suit, since prior to this you have absolutely nothing other than a crosshair on your screen? The next type of UI that I'd like to talk about is spatial. Some games have little to no spatial UI, others may rely quite heavily on it. It really just depends on the game. A game that I think does spatial UI very well is World of Warcraft, particularly Classic and maybe up to Cataclysm. And I say this because I really don't think I remember too much beyond Cataclysm. I know that as the game progressed, they did kind of add new elements to UI and other things that I don't recognize when I look at retail versions of the game, so that's why I mention it. You of course have the iconic quest markers for available and completed quests over NPCs and sometimes objects. These markers are of a specific yellow color, which is present in a lot of WoW's UI, particularly text on buttons and even the logo of the game itself. This makes it stand out above all other things, makes it especially effective when you see a gray marker that you're not leveled enough to take, or maybe when you find an object where the marker is absent altogether, as if it makes the discovery more meaningful. You can have character names and even nameplates, or you can choose to have absolutely none of that on your screen. Undiscovered flight paths with the green exclamation mark and daily quests are blue. You can easily distinguish them from a distance. Later in Wrath of the Lich King, they introduced like this sparkly effect on items that you need to collect for quests, which does make it a lot easier if objects are in grass, for example. Sometimes it's just really hard to see certain items. I want to bring up Diablo 2 again, but when items drop, they have a label with their name on it so that you can see what you want to pick up or leave behind. Again, the font is consistent, but one thing that we really haven't fully delved into are sound effects, and particularly in Diablo, these can be crucial as different sounds exist for different objects, and you're less likely to miss out on an important treasure when you finish clearing a pack of demons. But from an artistic perspective, it makes gems, jewels, and other valuables feel more expensive and, well, more valuable. Additionally, I also really like it when different objects in games make different sounds as you move them around in your inventory. Again, I think that this just makes it much more immersive. One of my favorite in-game sounds is when you pick up bullets or armor in Quake. It has a really ASMR-like quality that I quite enjoy. The final class of UI that I'd like to mention here is meta. This is stuff that's in the game story, but not in the game space. For example, you get hit and there is blood on your screen, or the screen changes color when you're low on health. Maybe your character has had a bit too much to drink, and so now your screen goes blurry. Meta UI elements exist to tell you about your character's state, whether you are hurt, or drunk, or whatever else may be happening to you. These are often effective in that it can sometimes feel like you were hit in real life. I like when horror games do this especially because it adds to the adrenaline, makes things scarier, and it makes me work more to avoid getting hit. So these are the 4 classes of UI, and I've mostly given examples of when it's done really well, when it adds to a game, when it makes things more immersive. But when the artistic element of UI is ignored, oftentimes it can make things bland, boring, and ultimately you are less attached to the game and its experience. I've mentioned Skyrim as one such example, but I've kind of also explained why maybe for that particular game it almost works. But Elden Ring, on the other hand, like, it just feels like more could have been done, especially when comparing it to other Souls-like games that came before. And an overly simplistic UI doesn't necessarily mean that it's simple to navigate. An example of bad UI are the menus in GTA 5 Online. It feels like you're looking at a wall of text. It takes ages to get anywhere, feels like you're going through instruction manuals in a language that you don't speak. Menus, even if they need to be more simple for whatever the game is, shouldn't be a chore to navigate. One that I personally don't like is the PUBG inventory. I don't know, I just always get confused with the pickup vicinity and my actual inventory. I feel like I always have to spend too much time there, and that's not really ideal in a battle royale scenario. I know I talk about RPGs a lot, and to be honest, I feel a little sad when they opt for a boring Skyrim-like UI, especially if the game is good and has an interesting world. I want this reflected in the UI. Very often, I might just get bored if it doesn't. Like, I really wanted to get into Lost Ark at one point, but the UI there just felt so bland, and I know that this is a game with a huge pre-existing fan base, and I was kind of late to the party as it was, but yeah, I just couldn't get into it, and UI was definitely part of the problem. And that covers it for the art of game UI. The design of the UI depends heavily on the sort of game that you're creating. RPGs require more fantastical UI elements. Shooters may opt for more minimalism. Horror games need something to really pull you into their dark worlds in terms of more immersive and integrated UI elements. There can be overlaps, exceptions to the rules, etc., but one thing is clear. UI is an underappreciated art form that in modern games seems to go down the route of being oversimplified for the sake of dedicating more time to other elements of the game or who knows what else. I am of the opinion that neglecting UI as an art form in games can often do a major disservice to the great work done in other areas of games, and I do hope to see future installments of my favorite games, or just new titles altogether, pay more attention to UI as a whole. And that's that for today's video. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. As always, big thanks to my channel members, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Be seeing you. Bye!